our top story of the day. We head to Chicago, Illinois, home of FourKites, where layoffs were announced through a company email yesterday. Grace Sharkey is here to fill us in.
Grace, let's talk about kind of the latest updates. FourKites, now the most recent large freight tech company to announce these layoffs as we're coming into this tight market. Tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, we received an email from a customer company that dove into a lot of the issues that they're having with one of their acquisitions last year, Haven. Now, when FourKites acquired Haven, part of that deal was to combine Haven's document management systems with their own systems to create Dynamic Ocean, which would create a track and trace / document management global shipping platform, right? And what we learned through this individual, this source who wanted to remain anonymous for just purposes of retaliation, is that the document management piece never really worked out the way it did. So this is a two-part story. We have a piece of technology that's being questioned, right? As we saw in that email, a big part of this was that the board of the company wanted to go through a full product portfolio review and like they said, align to market realities. A lot of what we're seeing across a number of tech companies today. And I think part of that strategy was also looking into the employees and different positions within the company that also align with the current market realities. So in both situations, there was the unfortunate layoff to a number of employees. That was confirmed by FourKites and sources outside of the company as well. But a part of the story that I was working on, almost in tandem with this exact layoff story, was a large product that the company had hoped would have paid off in the long run. Now, in the email, which was from the CEO and founder, Matt, they did explain that it was one of the most unprofitable pieces. Now, I will say that in FourKites' response, they did say that in tangent with Dynamic Ocean, it was profitable. I will let the audience choose to how they want to gauge those two opinions. But I think what's interesting, and even from this customer's perspective, is that that documentation piece never truly came to fruition, which was the main point of the acquisition. And I think that there's likely a due diligence or an understanding when it was acquired that they would be able to get a number of these BCOs to participate more than they had. We hear about this rhetoric a lot with a lot of freight tech companies, especially in visibility. If everyone works together, right, if we can all share systems, if we can all integrate together, that'll be a better, brighter world. Well, in some cases, that's not 100% possible. And I think in this one, it was assumed that a lot of the extra costs would be maybe eaten by some of those implementation partners in order to have a better system, bring in more customers, etc. But that situation never actually occurred. So it's really a two-part story of what we're seeing just in general for freight tech companies across the board, especially ones that have raised a lot of money. Those boards are going to want to make sure that we're starting to see profits sometime soon. And a lot of times that means going through the products that you have available and making sure they're actually bringing in money to the company and not performing a loss over time.
And misfiring, miscommunication, mismanagement. And really speaking on mismanagement, do you see this investment as being a mismanaged opportunity or really just a bad investment from the beginning?
I think when so we got this really intense, I'd say technological race to the top between a number of visibility players. The top right, you see our Project 44 and FourKites. You've got Overhaul. You've got a number of companies within that we see recently, even in Gartner studies as well. And I think that this original move was made to make sure that FourKites had remained on top. There had been a number of acquisitions at the time by its competitor, and especially in this space and ocean visibility. And this was, I mean, even talking to the customer who wanted this piece, this was something that they needed. The document side is something that they needed in order to improve the piece of their business. And I think at the time it was acquired to make sure that they had the exact same firepower as maybe their competitors, but unfortunately it just didn't work out the way that it was, and so now they're breaking it up, and still I will still have some type of documentation process, I'm sure, available to their customers over time, but doing it through this piece is just something that didn't work out after it was acquired in 2021, and still hasn't worked out, and is now being, by the end of this year, all customers will be off of Haven, and will no longer be working off of that, but just through their ocean dynamic system. So I think it might have been a speedy acquisition to keep up with their current competitors in the space. One that they're hoping, with the talent that they have within their four walls, they could probably fix and manage better. But unfortunately, like I said, if all parties involved with the transaction, involved with the system, isn't on board for the greater good of the cause, there's not much more that FourKites can do to make sure that this works out for them in the long run.
So going forward for FourKites, they're obviously going to restructure their portfolio a little bit and kind of realign their goals and their priorities. Where does that take them now, looking ahead to the future?
I think this is something we're seeing from every single freight tech company right now, is that to be involved in the future, to be an existing player in the future, you have to make those really tough decisions right now. And a lot of, like I said, a lot of them have a number of backers behind them that are probably poking and prodding during these times, saying, what is that profit looking like? All of these promises that a number of these investors have been told, they want to see that actually come to the table. So to say that FourKites is going to completely fall apart because of something like this, I think that's way too early and way too drastic to say right now. But I think it shows that they want to be a competitor in the future, and if that means taking this huge step and saying, this acquisition didn't work out, and we're looking towards the future in order to keep a product like this on the table for our customers, that's one thing. I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle against their competitors who do have this platform available, because now you do have a bunch of customers out there looking for a solution. So that's not the best position to be in at this time, clearly. But it's an unfortunate event that they're going to have to now figure out how to manage around.
So, Grace, let's kind of frame this in a larger scope of what's going on in the freight tech market. You mentioned it about a month and a half ago as we kind of turned into the middle part of Q2 and started seeing this economic decline. We're going to start seeing that people are demanding results and demanding actual proof of the concept and proof of the product, whether that's your customers who bought in initially, whether that's your investors who decided to pour some of this VC money into these large companies like this. They want to know that it's working, because we're not in a market anymore where the hope of it is going to keep it alive, right? We are at a place now where the proof has to be in the pudding in your cup right now. So can you talk to us a little bit about how kind of this fits into that larger scale and what that means for FourKites going forward, taking on some of their priorities?
I think in my conversation with this source in particular, and the email, there's a really interesting rhetoric that they had brought up. That's something I think I've heard from a number of people who might not even be using a lot of these visibility products. At the end of the day, visibility is a very interesting term. And if you can't get the carriers on board with it in order to properly bring that visibility to the table, then that's where do we even stand truly as an industry with visibility? And this was not just looking at FourKites, but every single player out there. Here's the great thing about freight tech. every team has an incredible sales force, and you would be surprised what a lot of these players can sell and push to their customers. But the biggest issue is what happens next. What's happening in implementation? What hiccups are occurring? And in this case, this company wanted the document software management tool. They're having issues with port shipments being stuck because they didn't have the right documents in place. And this is what that tool was promised to be. And this is the one thing that never actually truly worked for these customers. And so I think for this source, and I hear this from others when talking about visibility in space, it's going to take a different approach, I think, in the future to get these different players, not just the global shippers themselves, but even down to the actual truck drivers, right? They're going to have to be a part of this, and they're going to have to give up their data and their information in order to make all this work. So I think it's just a really interesting case for anyone out there looking to invest in a better visibility solution to really do your due diligence and really ask a lot of questions and figure out long term, like what the company is doing, where they're at, and what products they are focused on. Because I've heard this critique of a number of visibility plays that at the end of the day, if you don't have the carriers behind it participating in the grand ecosystem of things, it's just not doing much more than the teams can do themselves, especially this individual who has working a number of shipments globally on a single day. So I think I'd like to see improvement in regards to the value of a lot of the visibility players out there. And hopefully this article kind of pushes them to realize that all these shippers that made investments in 2021 and want a more agile supply chain with better visibility, as many buzzwords that we want to use, it's not doing anything. What's its value?
Grace, excellent points this entire morning. Thanks so much for joining us for this top story, and we'll be sure to check in with you, I'm sure, as the story develops and everything that you're really working on.
Thank you guys so much. Have a good morning.
Have a great weekend, Grace, as always. Right now, we're going to toss it over to the wall. We've got our first carrier update this morning. Thomas Wasson is in for Tony Mulvey. He joins Donnie Gilbert.